Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Fawwadtu amri ilallah, innallah basirun bil ibad. It is my privilege today to welcome you all here in this seminar on financial crisis management. And it is an interesting topic, and there are many opinions about it. And we would like to know that what impact it will have on Pakistan. And, so, without wasting much of your time, I would request Dr. Ishrat Husain, Dean and Director, IBA, to give inaugural letters.
Thank you very much. I want to welcome all of you at 9:30 in the morning for Karachi. I think this is very unusual to have such a good turnaround. So that means that you are interested in the topic. We have very impressive set of speakers, and therefore I would not like to preempt what the discussion is going to be. But I wanted to set the context because there is a doom and gloom scenario which is being sketched since 2008. And even today, if you look at most of the commentary, it is pretty negative. But let me take you back to where we were and where we came as far as 2008. And that context is very important because you don't want to throw the baby with the bathwater, because financial innovation, financial engineering, and financial complex derivatives and other products have got a lot of escaping and a lot of condemnation. So I just thought that I would like to present a context in which world economy has performed. I would submit that the world economy has recorded the fastest growth in the last 50 years. Even in this decade of slow growth, the global economy was growing 10 to 20% faster than it did a decade ago, 60% faster than it did 2 decades ago, and 5 times as fast as it did 3 decades ago. So despite the fact that we are all in a recessionary mode, you look at the relative progress which has been made, it is quite tremendous. But more heartening from my perspective as a development economist is a remarkable shift in the power and equilibrium of the global economy. 50 years ago, if you read Gunnar Myrdal and his Asian drama, which predicted a scenario where Asia will remain a laggard and will always be the sick man of the global economy, the emerging and developing economies, almost from a negligible share 50 years ago in the global economy, are now hovering about 50%. 3/4 of the global economic growth during the last decade, and last decade, I want to emphasize that point, has flown not from the developed countries, but from the emerging and developing countries. And as you all know, China is going to outclass the United States as the single largest economy. I'm not talking the per capita incomes, I'm talking of the size of the economy. It has already overtaken Germany as the single largest exporting nation in the world. If Mr. Myrdal was alive today, he would be taken by big surprise. Even India, which was taken as a written-off case by most commentators in the 1960s, is likely to be the 3rd largest economy in the world. In 1980, the number of emerging and developing countries which were growing at 4% per annum were 60. By 2007, this number had grown to 120. And even after the financial crisis, the recent data shows that 80 countries in the world, emerging countries and developing countries, are growing at 4% per annum, despite the gloomy and dooming scenario of the world economy. And ladies and gentlemen, the average growth rate during this lost decade of 2000 to 2010 for emerging and developing countries was 6.4%, which is highly impressive. But what does growth mean if it doesn't affect the living standards of the people? And therefore, I now can turn my attention to poverty. Poverty has been reduced more in the last 50 years than the previous 500 years. And this is a fact which we should all be very, very proud of. 1 billion people have been lifted out of poverty since 1980. 1 billion people. And you may know, or you may not have realized, that the proportion of the people living below the poverty, which is 52% in 1980, is down to 20% in 2010. And the good news is, I spent most of my time working on Africa, and I was very, very disillusioned because Africa was really not making much progress. The latest statistics show that poverty has declined even in Africa, because the growth rate in Africa has also picked up to more than 5%. So there is no region among the 6 regions in the world where the poverty rate has not declined. So it is a very sweeping, spread of poverty reduction. It is not concentrated only in Asia, which is the popular, paradigm that everything is happening in Africa, in Asia, and other regions are not benefiting. This is not true. And the World Bank projections show that the global target of halving the poverty, which was to be achieved in 2015, has already been achieved in 2010. This is a kind of progress we have seen on the standard of living. Of course, there has been an increase in income inequalities. One of the countries which had very good income distribution before 1980, which was China, has now a Gini coefficient of 0.44, which in my view is pretty hard as far as the income distribution is concerned. But the fact that there are only 80 million people living below the poverty line in China out of 1.2 billion is equally heartening to me. And that is where we stand today. Let's look at the real sector of the economy. People have been complaining about population growth, and the popular theme is, oh, agriculture has been neglected, everything is going for manufacturing and now services sector. The facts are that agriculture production has actually been ahead of the world population increase. While the world production of food has increased by 75%, the world population has increased by 50%. So there is an increase in the caloric intake as well as the per capita food consumption of the population. So it's not only growth, poverty, but also the consumption levels of the basic food stuff, which is making the difference as far as the standards of living is concerned. And I don't have to tell this audience that the mobility of capital, ideas, technology, goods and services has, across the country boundaries, has never been so high as it is today. There is no period in the human history where cross-border barriers are crumbling down. And the biggest example is the Facebook, where 900 million people have communications with each other all over the world. And finally, world trade growth has consistently surpassed the world economic growth rates. And that means that countries are producing surpluses beyond their own domestic consumption in order to trade with each other. And as you know, trade is an engine of economic growth. So with the breaking of the barriers between the boundaries, you also have these flow of goods and services according to the comparative advantage of each country, so everybody benefits from that. So if a country has a lower cost of production in goods A, it can sell it to country X, and the country X can sell its goods, which are cheaper, to country Y. And that has stimulated a tremendous amount of growth. Having said that, the human ingenuity and technology have created some difficult situations also. And the financial innovation and financial engineering, which has facilitated the flow of capital from one country to another and integrated the financial markets, has had some very pernicious and perverse impact on the global financial system. And that's where my colleagues and experts today will be talking about you. Let me quote what Alan Greenspan said, that with my own understanding of mathematical models and with 200 PhDs at my disposal, if I could not understand most of these exotic derivatives in the products, I wonder if the counterparties which were entering into these contracts were aware as to what they were going for. And there, I think, is the starting point of the global financial crisis. With these few words, let me once again welcome you and hope that you have a very fruitful and healthy discussion this whole day. Thank you very much.